Hi everybody, my name is Kayla. We said we want to go to the club. And no, but we want to go to the club soon. This is not.
A 23-year-old beauty queen texted her killer, "Kidnap me again," just hours before he shot her in the head and buried her behind an abandoned middle school. He already had a kidnapping warrant. The courts had already let him walk. The proof: Kian King had already kidnapped and beaten his previous girlfriend with a gun 9 months earlier, got arrested twice, posted $20,000 bail, and walked free when prosecutors dropped the charges after the victim stopped showing up to court. Carter Scott was a Penn State graduate, former cheerleader, and Miss Philadelphia Township who was competing to represent Pennsylvania at Miss USA. King was a 21-year-old with an active kidnapping warrant that 2 different judges somehow missed when he appeared in their courtrooms. Surveillance cameras captured 2 people carrying what investigators described as an object consistent with a body into the woods at 3 in the morning. This is the Carter Scott case. How does a text saying "kidnap me again" connect to a shallow grave discovered 2 weeks later? This is how every system failed Carter Scott. Carter Scott was 23 years old, creative, and obsessed with building her own fashion empire. She had graduated from Penn State University in 2023 with a communications degree and had designed her own clothing brand in the past. She was a former Penn State cheerleader who had won the Miss Philadelphia Township pageant and was actively competing to reach Miss USA. Her father Kevin described her as ambitious with an entrepreneurial spirit. Her mother was Kim Matthews, and Carter lived with family in Philadelphia while working at the Terrace, an assisted living facility in Chestnut Hill. On October 4, 2025, Carter was at work when she started receiving calls that visibly upset her. A co-worker witnessed her on the phone saying, "I can't believe you're calling me about this," followed by profanity. That morning at 10:07, she had texted someone saved in her phone as Kel with the message "kidnap me again." He replied, "Better be up too," and they made plans to meet that night. Their final text exchange happened at 10:09 that evening with Carter writing "CM when you hear," which investigators believe meant "call me when you're here." According to court documents, Carter received a dozen calls that night starting at 9:25 and continuing until 10:12. At 10:24, her cell phone stopped transmitting a signal completely. Would she ever make it to the Miss USA competition she was training for? Did she know the person texting her had a loaded weapon and a history of kidnapping women? Kian King was 21 years old and according to Philadelphia police records, he had a very specific type of violence he inflicted on women he dated. Investigators identified him as Kel in Carter's phone after tracing the number that sent the "kidnap me again" text on October 2nd, when someone wrote, "Yo Carter, this my new number." The relationship timeline between Carter and King isn't fully documented in court records, but the text exchange suggests they had prior contact involving something Carter referenced as a previous kidnapping. What is documented is King's treatment of his ex-girlfriend 9 months before Carter died. In January 2025, King returned to his ex-girlfriend's home after midnight on January 13th with what appeared to be a gun in his waistband. He had already been arrested in December 2024 for burglary and strangulation after allegedly grabbing the same woman by the neck. The January incident involved King trying to break into her home, and later that day, video captured him returning with a visible weapon. He then kidnapped and assaulted her with the gun. A warrant for his arrest was issued days later. Here's what makes King different from typical domestic violence suspects. He appeared in Philadelphia court twice in February and March for the December strangulation case, and both times, no one in the courtroom knew he had an active kidnapping warrant. Both times, Kian King walked out of the courthouse a free man. When he finally turned himself in on the kidnapping charge in April, prosecutors requested bail of $999,999. The magisterial judge set it at $200,000 instead. King posted $20,000 and was released. By May, when the victim didn't appear at 2 hearings, the kidnapping charges were withdrawn. But on October 4th, something inside King activated again, or maybe the violence had never actually stopped. The night of October 4th started with a stolen car and ended with a body in the woods, but the violence happened somewhere in between that investigators are still piecing together. On October 3rd at 11:30 at night, Philadelphia police responded to a vehicle theft at 6600 Sprague Street. A delivery driver reported someone dressed in all black stole their 2008 black Hyundai Accent hatchback. That car would become critical 24 hours later. Carter left the terrace-assisted living facility on the night of October 4th visibly upset after those dozen phone calls from King's number. Her co-worker saw her get into a dark-colored car that matched the description of the stolen Hyundai Accent. At 10:24, Carter's cell phone transmitted its final signal. 4 minutes later at 10:28, the black Hyundai Accent arrived at Auberry Recreation Center's parking lot in East Germantown. Sources told CBS News Philadelphia that their investigation determined Carter was killed 20 minutes after leaving work. That means between 10:12 when the calls stopped and 10:32, someone shot Carter Scott in the head. The medical examiner would later confirm the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head with the manner ruled homicide. What happened in those 20 minutes isn't fully documented in public court records, but what is known is that Carter never made it home. Her phone went dark. The stolen Hyundai showed up at a recreation center parking lot. And somewhere in Philadelphia, Carter Scott was dying from a bullet wound while the person who shot her was planning what to do with her body. According to surveillance footage, on the night of October 5th at 11:39, a Toyota Camry registered to Kian King parked at the recreation center next to the abandoned Ada Lewis Middle School. 2 people exited the vehicle. Around 4 hours later, at approximately 3:30 in the morning, surveillance cameras captured 2 individuals removing a large object from the passenger side of another vehicle. Investigators described the object as consistent with a body. The 2 people carried it toward the woods behind the vacant middle school. One camera angle showed a second vehicle waiting by the streetlights near the recreation center while 2 people walked toward the school property. This means Carter's body was somewhere else for over 24 hours between her murder on October 4th and her burial on October 5th. Where was she during that time? Court documents don't specify, but what they do reveal is that King didn't act alone during the disposal. 2 other people were captured on surveillance that night. Who were they? What did they know? And why would anyone help bury a 23-year-old woman in a shallow grave? Here's the breadcrumb that would later unravel King's story. On October 5th, the same day Carter's body was being buried, someone torched the stolen black Hyundai Accent. The car that picked Carter up from work was now a burned shell. King had already turned himself into police on October 14th for unrelated charges, but at that point, Carter was only listed as missing. He declined a police interview. He was charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, stalking, and other offenses connected to Carter's disappearance, but not murder, because investigators hadn't found her body yet. Did witnesses at the burial site know they were accessories to murder? Could the car fire have destroyed evidence that would have told investigators exactly what happened in those missing 20 minutes? If you were a detective looking at surveillance footage of 2 people carrying a body into the woods at 3 in the morning, what would your next move be? Let us know in the comments. Carter Scott was reported missing on October 5th, the same day her body was being buried behind Ada Lewis Middle School and the stolen Hyundai was being torched. Philadelphia police made an urgent public plea for help finding her the day after the car burned. Friends and family told investigators that unknown people had been harassing Carter on her phone before she disappeared. For 13 days, police searched while Carter's body decomposed 50 feet into the woods behind an abandoned school. On October 18th, acting on what police described as a very specific anonymous tip, investigators found Carter's remains in a shallow grave in the wooded area behind the vacant middle school. The tip was so precise that it led them directly to the burial site. Who called it in? Court documents don't say, but someone knew exactly where to look. Was it one of the 2 people seen on surveillance? Was it someone King told? The anonymous tipster gave police the location, and within hours, they had confirmed there was a body. DNA testing on October 19th confirmed the remains belonged to Carter Scott. The Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office announced on October 23rd that her cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head and her manner of death was homicide. Her official date of death is listed as October 18th, the day her body was discovered, even though investigators believe she died on October 4th. This detail matters because it shows how much time passed while her family had no answers and King was already in custody on lesser charges. The surveillance footage became the prosecution's roadmap. Cameras captured the stolen Hyundai arriving at Auberry Recreation Center at 10:28 on October 4th, just 4 minutes after Carter's phone went dead. Cameras showed King's registered Toyota Camry parking at the same location on October 5th at 11:39. Cameras recorded 2 people carrying what appeared to be a body at approximately 3:30 in the morning on October 6th. Every movement was documented. Cell phone records revealed the timeline of those dozen calls to Carter on October 4th starting at 9:25 and ending at 10:12. Text message records showed the "Kidnap Me Again" exchange at 10:07 that morning and the final "CM when you hear" at 10:09 that night. Phone tower data showed Carter's phone going dark at 10:24. Technology built the timeline that King couldn't explain away. When King turned himself in on October 14th, he was only facing charges related to Carter's disappearance, not her murder, because police hadn't found her body yet. He declined to be interviewed by detectives. This was before the anonymous tip, before the shallow grave was discovered, before the medical examiner ruled it a homicide. King posted bail and walked out on kidnapping charges just like he had done in the previous case with his ex-girlfriend. But this time, investigators kept building their case. After the homicide ruling on October 23rd, District Attorney Larry Krasner's office approved a devastating list of additional charges: murder, robbery, theft, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and possessing an instrument of crime. Each charge represented a different piece of evidence prosecutors had compiled. The murder charge came from the gunshot wound. The tampering and abuse charges connected to the burial. The conspiracy charge suggested prosecutors believed King had help. The firearms violation indicated they had proof he possessed a gun illegally. But here's what investigators still can't fully answer. Where exactly was Carter killed? The stolen Hyundai arrived at the rec center at 10:28, but sources say she was killed by 10:32. Was she shot in the car? Was she shot at the rec center? Surveillance shows the car arriving, but it doesn't show what happened inside it. The car was later burned, destroying potential forensic evidence of blood spatter, gunshot residue, or bullet fragments. And who helped King? 2 people were seen on surveillance carrying the body. 2 people were in the rec center parking lot that night. King is charged with conspiracy, which means prosecutors believe at least one other person knowingly participated. But no other arrests have been announced publicly. Are those individuals cooperating with investigators? Are they still being sought? How do you explain away surveillance footage of yourself carrying a dead body into the woods at 3 in the morning? Why would someone confess to helping dispose of a murder victim? What was the one thing police couldn't ignore? The text message "Kidnap Me Again" sent the morning of Carter's murder. That single message connected King to Carter on the day she died and referenced a prior incident involving kidnapping. Combined with his documented history of kidnapping his ex-girlfriend 9 months earlier, that text message became a pattern of behavior prosecutors could present to a jury. Kian King was arraigned on the murder charge on October 24, 2025, one day after the medical examiner ruled Carter's death a homicide. He is being held without bail this time, a stark contrast to the $200,000 bail he posted in April when he was charged with kidnapping his previous girlfriend. The charges he faces are staggering: murder, kidnapping, false imprisonment, stalking, robbery, theft, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and possessing an instrument of crime. If convicted on all counts, King would face life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder charge alone. The prosecution's case is built on a foundation of surveillance footage, cell phone records, text messages, and forensic evidence that creates a timeline King cannot dispute. Their theory is straightforward. King had a documented pattern of kidnapping and assaulting women he was involved with. Carter texted him on October 4th referencing a previous kidnapping. He called her a dozen times that night. Her phone went dead at 10:24. The stolen car he allegedly used arrived at the rec center 4 minutes later, and she was shot in the head within 20 minutes of leaving work. 2 weeks later, surveillance captured people believed to include King burying her body behind an abandoned school. Prosecutors can point to the January kidnapping case where King held his ex-girlfriend at gunpoint. They can show the court that King appeared twice before judges who didn't know he had an active warrant. They can demonstrate that when charges were dropped in May due to the victim's absence, King was free to contact Carter Scott. They can present the text message "Kidnap Me Again" as evidence that King had previously done something to Carter that she characterized as kidnapping. They can show that Carter's co-worker heard her upset on the phone the night she disappeared. They can play the surveillance footage of the body being carried into the woods. Their strongest argument is the sheer volume of evidence that places King at the center of Carter's murder and burial. King is represented by attorney Shaka Johnson, who has faced intense public backlash for taking the case. A Change.org petition gathered over 2,000 signatures asking Johnson to withdraw as counsel. Johnson publicly stated he will not drop King as a client, saying every defendant deserves representation. The defense strategy hasn't been fully revealed in public court proceedings yet, But Johnson faces an uphill battle against the evidence prosecutors have compiled. How do you defend someone when surveillance cameras captured the burial? The defense would need to argue that the people on camera aren't King and his associates, or that the object being carried wasn't actually Carter's body, or that King wasn't present during the burial even if his car was. But DNA confirmed the body was Carter's, and the footage shows King's registered vehicle at the scene. The defense could potentially argue that King didn't pull the trigger even if he helped dispose of the body, but the murder charge suggests prosecutors have evidence tying him directly to her death, not just the cover-up. Does the "kidnap me again" text message even help the defense? Some might argue it shows Carter willingly contacted King and agreed to meet him, suggesting she wasn't afraid. But prosecutors would counter that the text actually proves King had kidnapped Carter before, establishing a pattern of violence. Combined with the co-worker's testimony that Carter was upset during those phone calls, the text message becomes evidence of an abusive dynamic, not consent. The case hasn't gone to trial yet as of January 2026. King remains in custody without bail awaiting his day in court. Preliminary hearings and pretrial motions are still being conducted. The district attorney's office has stated they are still investigating potential co-conspirators, which suggests the case may expand to include charges against the other individuals seen on surveillance footage. Do you think Kian King deserves life without parole if convicted? Drop your thoughts below. Kian King sits in a Philadelphia jail cell awaiting trial with no possibility of bail this time. Carter Scott's family buried her on November 8, 2025, at the Mount Airy Church of God in Christ in a service open to the public. Attendees wore pink, Carter's favorite color. Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle Parker spoke during the funeral and announced an internship program in Carter's honor specifically designed for young women. 10 days later, on what would have been Carter's 24th birthday, her family launched the Carter Scott Foundation to provide scholarships, grants, and mentors for young women pursuing education, business, fashion, and entrepreneurship, the areas Carter loved most. Her father Kevin Scott told reporters that Carter was ambitious, kind, creative, and had an entrepreneurial spirit. Her mother Kim Matthews and the rest of the family are left with photographs and memories of a daughter who graduated from Penn State, cheered on the sidelines, won beauty pageants, and dreamed of representing Pennsylvania at Miss USA. Instead of watching Carter compete on a national stage, they are watching the legal system prosecute her alleged killer. The ripple effects of Carter's murder exposed catastrophic failures in Philadelphia's criminal justice system that officials are now scrambling to fix. District Attorney Larry Krasner admitted there is no system to automatically notify prosecutors when a defendant in one of their cases is arrested on new charges. There is no system to alert police when suspects in new cases have outstanding warrants in other matters. Krasner said the issues stem from law enforcement agencies using digital information systems that are decades old and don't communicate with each other. This is how King appeared before two different judges in February and March on strangulation charges while having an active kidnapping warrant, and both times walked out of court without anyone knowing. The DA's office acknowledged it was a mistake to withdraw the kidnapping charges against King in May when his ex-girlfriend stopped appearing in court. Prosecutors said the January case was largely captured on video, meaning they could have proceeded without the victim's testimony. They chose not to. 6 months later, Carter Scott was dead. Philadelphia City Council President Kenyatta Johnson stated, "As the city of Philadelphia, I think we failed the young lady." On December 10, 2025, City Council's Public Safety Committee held a hearing to examine the city's strategies, laws, and policies for protecting victims of abuse and domestic violence within the justice system. According to Women Against Abuse, Philadelphia police respond to more than 100,000 calls related to domestic violence every year. Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel discussed plans for a new database where high-risk cases are flagged for immediate intervention and entered into a lethality database for tracking. Krasner announced he would request funding from Mayor Parker and City Council to establish a prolific domestic violence offender unit made up of specialized lawyers assigned to cases from preliminary stages through trial. The DA's office began holding weekly meetings with the Philadelphia Police Department, Women Against Abuse, and other stakeholders to examine serious cases before they escalate. These are the systemic changes Carter's death forced into existence. But unanswered questions still haunt this case. Why did Carter text King "kidnap me again" on the morning she was murdered? What happened during the alleged first kidnapping that she was referencing? Court documents don't explain the context of that message, or whether Carter was being sarcastic, flirtatious, or genuinely requesting something. The phrasing suggests she had previously been kidnapped by King, but there's no documented report of Carter reporting a kidnapping to police before October 4th. Who were the two other people seen on surveillance helping dispose of her body? Prosecutors charged King with conspiracy, indicating they believe others were involved, but no additional arrests have been publicly announced. Are those individuals cooperating witnesses? Are they still being sought? If they helped bury Carter, what else did they know about her murder? Where exactly was Carter killed? The stolen Hyundai that picked her up from work was later burned, potentially destroying the crime scene. Investigators believe she was killed within 20 minutes of leaving work, but the precise location hasn't been revealed in court documents. Was she shot in the car? At the rec center? Somewhere else entirely? Could this have been stopped? If prosecutors hadn't dropped the kidnapping charges against King in May, he would have been in jail in October when Carter died. If the judges who saw King in February and March had been notified of his active warrant, he wouldn't have walked free. If the outdated computer systems Philadelphia relies on could communicate across departments, the gaps that allowed King to slip through wouldn't exist. Carter Scott died because multiple systems failed simultaneously, and now city officials are being forced to answer whether updating those systems matters enough to fund properly. No sentence brings Carter Scott back. But this case reveals that domestic violence victims in Philadelphia are being failed by a criminal justice system running on technology and procedures that can't keep up with repeat offenders who know how to exploit the gaps. A Penn State graduate who won beauty pageants and designed her own clothing texted her killer, "Kidnap me again," 12 hours before he shot her in the head and buried her behind an abandoned school, while prosecutors had already dropped kidnapping charges against him 6 months earlier for doing the same thing to another woman. The haunting question is whether Carter knew she was in danger when she sent that text, or if she trusted someone who had already shown her exactly who he was. Next video drops tomorrow on a case where a mother reported her own daughter missing while the child's body was already hidden in her basement freezer wrapped in Christmas lights. Subscribe to True Crime Doc for cases nobody else is covering yet.